I'm here with Kerry Barrett, Emmy award-winning TV news anchor. She did it for 20 years, decided to make a switch, and brought all the skills that she learned being an Emmy award-winning TV news anchor to her consulting firm where she's willing to help you get to a really high level with what you're doing. So welcome, Kerry.
Thank you so much. Just say Emmy one more time because I like the way that sounds. I'm just teasing. Thank you. Yeah, I don't normally talk about the awards, but I appreciate you bringing that up. And yeah, I like to say that I'm using my skills in broadcast news for good now. And by that, I mean to help people hone their abilities on video to figure out exactly how to tell their story, what their message is, and then the delivery. The camera is a weird thing. We think of it as talking to another person, and that is what I advise. You know, you're talking to a camera lens and you may be talking to millions of people, but really you have an audience of one and you're talking to that person. But there are some nuances that come with talking into a lens versus talking to a face that make your delivery and your performance a little bit different, and you have to prepare for that. Yeah.
And I think we've all experienced that with the downward eye look and the messy background and the feeling uncomfortable on these Zoom videos. So you really have techniques. I saw somebody in your LinkedIn post, I think, who did a testimonial for you, and
Yeah.
he looked like a natural.
Oh, well, I think you're talking about Rosie, who is a graphic artist and a marketer. And I did a brand story for her and her business called Shattered Pencil Studios. It's the most recent brand story that I did. And she is a natural on camera, honestly. She has a charming personality. She's very warm. She's very welcoming. And those are things that come across when she speaks on camera. But there are nuances to how you frame your messaging, how you speak in sound bites, and then how you deliver that. So for example, the camera has a way of muting everything that you do, right? Except for the things that you don't want it to. The things that you want to minimize, it amplifies. Yay! We love that about it. It's an evil mistress, that camera is. But there are things you can do with your delivery that help mitigate that. So I always advise people, and this is something I learned from my time on camera as a news anchor. I would think that I was being super animated and I was really connecting with the words that I was saying and I was getting that message across. And then I would go back and look and I would feel like I looked half asleep or I looked tired or, I don't know what was going on. And I realized that that's just how the camera works. It kind of mutes everything. It puts another filter between you and your audience. So I always say, sit yourself in front of your camera, do a recording on Zoom or whatever video platform it is that you use, and go back and look and see if your energy level matches A, what you're saying, and B, what you thought it would be. And very often it's a little bit less than, and you have to you really have to go over the top to look over the top on camera. So I always advise people to get comfortable with feeling really uncomfortable with their energy level in the beginning. And then you start to calibrate and figure out where that sweet spot is. But it's always more animated than it would be were you talking to someone face to face.
Well, you do a good job, obviously, because this woman looked perfect. And I can't imagine that any of us would start out that way. I mean, you had 20 years to hone this craft.
Well, it's interesting, and a lot of it is just, it really is trial and error, because what works for some people, and the messaging and the delivery is slightly different. If you're perhaps, you're speaking to a group of lawyers, or you're speaking to, an engineering association, right? Their delivery and their clientele is going to be slightly different than if you're working in perhaps a super creative field. If you're in advertising or marketing, the energy is a little bit different, but there are things that go across all industries and across all verticals. And that is using emotion to tell stories and making sure that the way that those stories come out of your mouth is congruent with what your body language and your facial expression and your cadence and your pitch and your tone are. So you calibrate your message and the way it's delivered for the audience in terms of how, I don't know, perhaps extreme is the word that you would use, but you calibrate that message for whomever is going to be on the other side of the camera. And again, it's always an audience of one, whether you're speaking to a group of engineers and there's 20 of them, or whether you're speaking to, a national association. You always imagine one person on the other side of the lens, and that's the way that you're able to connect with everybody as an individual speaking to them that way rather than speaking to them as a group.
So would you say that most business owners probably need this and need the training from someone like you or from
Well,
you?
yeah, well, it's interesting because when I started my business about a year ago, and I was in the process of networking and figuring out what the heck it was that I was going to do, because I'd never done anything other than TV news. And I know, I know what PR does, but what does the day in the life of a PR executive look like, or a day in the life of a marketer? Like, what does the actual process look like in their day to day? And I was talking to a woman who says, you know what? You have this skill set that you've curated over 20 years that most people don't have. You can go in and help them fix the issues they have. And then, whether they need additional training, or they just need a boot camp, or they need some consulting as their project continues, but you can go in and fix it and send them on their, merry way, if you will, being able to produce the content on their own. You don't need to go back into corporate. And I thought, oh yeah, that's exactly what I'm going to do. I'm going to start my own business, and I'm going to teach people how to use my camera skills for good, right? Not in the news, but to help broadcast their brand and their business, and, their personal brand as well. And so video is exploding. We know that YouTube and Google are, inextricably linked. And if you don't have video content out there, you're missing out on a huge portion of your potential clients. And so it doesn't mean that you always have to have a slickly produced brand video that, is on your landing page or on your LinkedIn page, although I do recommend that. That is helpful. But what it means is that you can produce videos on your phone, right? It's a great way to stretch your marketing budget. You can produce 2-minute long videos or 3-minute long videos on 4K. I mean, this is good quality stuff that we all have in the palm of our hand, and push that out across your social platforms. You can use video to onboard clients. You can use video to create value or education or tutorials or thought leadership pieces. And so the opportunities for video use are exploding. And if you're not on that train, that video train, it's going to run you down at some point. So you best hop on and figure out how to make it work for you. And I think people are finally beginning to understand, because we're in this day of virtual events and Zoom calls, et cetera, even if they didn't see themselves as being somebody who needs camera skills or video training, they now recognize that there is a benefit in being able to deliver your message clearly, crisply, succinctly, and with some professional expertise, because we're all on these platforms now, and there is some ability that we have to grow our business on them, but we have to be able to do it correctly. If we don't know what we're doing on camera, our clients are going to assume we don't know what we're doing off camera either. And that's not a good thing.
I agree. And I think the other thing about working with someone like you, or you, I mean, you're very good, so you would be my choice. Yes. You feel more comfortable with yourself than on camera. So you're not as deer in the headlights and not as uncomfortable, because the awkwardness comes through. If you feel like you're really awkward, it comes, right?
It's one of those things that we don't want amplified that the camera amplifies, and all the great stuff it mutes. I know, it's like I said, that evil mistress, but you're absolutely right. Once you get comfortable on camera, you begin to see opportunities for value and marketing anywhere. And you don't have to necessarily sit down and plot out exactly what it is that you're going to say and memorize it. In fact, I recommend never doing that. But you're comfortable enough to sit down, hit record, and start talking, and know that, right, what comes out is probably going to be usable. If it's not, then you hit stop and you re-record, and it's that simple. There's not a lot that has to go into it. It doesn't need to be a big long process of editing and production. But once you're comfortable with it, you start to see the ability to do it everywhere. You can push out marketing videos from your kitchen if you need to right now. I like to say, actually, one of the things that, because I hated looking at myself on camera, especially when I first started it in the news business, and 20 years in, I still don't like it. I still find it cringe inducing. But one of the things I say that I teach people is to get comfortable with your own self-loathing. And once you get comfortable with your own self-loathing, you're okay with almost anything you put on here. And that's the key. It's practice, and then publish, practice, publish, practice, publish. Once you get that pattern going, you start to feel comfortable with your content, and you don't really care if people aren't watching it at the beginning, or there's trolls that jump out of the woodwork, which happens when you're doing big things and they're not. You get comfortable with all that, or at least you are willing to overlook it.
Anytime you own a business, anytime you put yourself out there in any way, there's always going to be people that want to tear you down or say
Right.
things. And I think the fact is most people are probably 3/4 of the way there. They look pretty good on video. You help them get that polish and that confidence, right?
Right.
And tell the story. Like that's a huge marketing thing, to be able to tell your story. And
Right.
I think that's really important because people do want to know what the story is. Like for you, 20 years as a news anchor, Emmy award winning. That's a story. And how
Right.
to tell that story to people. And
Yeah. One of the things that's interesting is that I think, I used to be terrified of public speaking. I mean, when I tell you terrified, I mean, back of the room, curled up in the fetal position, not a rational fear of public speaking, a crazed, extreme phobia of public speaking. If you were to talk to any of my high school friends, they would tell you that newscaster was the last thing they would have ever pictured me doing as a profession, let alone for 2 decades. But once you figure out right, and that's part of my story as well. And once you figure out that stories, right, data and statistics are important, and they can back up stories, and they can provide ROI, they can provide information. But it's the stories, right? It's the emotion that sits with people, and it's the stories that compel them to act or do what it is that you'd like them to do, or perhaps at least respond to your call to action. So figuring out how to package those stories and then how to calibrate them for the length of the video, the audience. Does this need to be a 30-second story? Can this be a 5-minute story? And what are the different elements that I include in that story? Because what you think is your best story is not necessarily the best story for every audience. It's figuring out what your story is that's appropriate for the audience in front of you. And that takes a little bit of practice and a little bit of finesse and refinements as well.
And that is so important.
Yeah.
Because you might get away with a few jokes if you're talking to a group of moms that just have little kids and, da da da. But if you're talking to Bill Gates, like you're probably not going to tell the same story, right?
Probably not going to regale him with stories of my college partying. No. But yeah, you got to figure out who your audience is and what kind of story is going to resonate with them. And then the next step is figuring out what kind of holes they're going to want to punch in your story, and then how it is that you follow up, and what it is that you need to tell them as it relates to the story, and whatever it is that you're trying to do, whether it's sell them something or get them to download a PDF or, click over to your website, or whatever it is, whatever you have to do to follow up with those arguments that they're going to create, whether they're internal or whether they're actually, throwing them out at you. How do you get them to take the next step despite that? And that's part of the story as well.
Yeah, that sounds like really interesting and a lot of work. It sounds like it really takes a creative mind and somebody who's been doing this for a long time to recognize those facets and put them all together.
There's definitely some strategy involved. And I would say one of the things that's helped me figure out what those pushback points are going to be is from my time in news and my time spent interviewing people and figuring out what are the elements that people will push back against, and how do they do that, and what is kind of at the core of those, right? Sometimes the pushback is pointing to something that's a little bit deeper. So are they afraid of what coaching means? Are they afraid that they're gonna step into this new area of discomfort and people are gonna mock them? I mean, there's something very personal that comes with public speaking, and especially with being on video, right? You are putting yourself out there in a way that that may feel more uncomfortable than text. Text and writing is very personal as well, but one of the things about video is that it lives forever. And it doesn't matter where you delete it, it is somewhere. And so people think about that, and they could be perfectly fine until that red light goes on, and then all of a sudden it's like that moment where you stop short. I use this analogy: a car stops quickly in front of you and you have to slam on your brakes. That feeling of adrenaline that kind of jolts through your body? It's like that when the camera goes on, and all of the personality and all of the characteristics that made that person unique, they sometimes they seem to shrivel up or evaporate when that red light goes on. And part of that is the anxiety, at least in a lot of people, knowing that if they screw up and this goes out, no matter where they pull it down from, somebody's going to have it somewhere and it will live on, perpetuity forever. And that's scary for a lot of people. And I get that. I can go back 20 years and find my mistakes on air, online somewhere, and it's never pleasant.
For like a lot of us, like some of our first home videos that we saw on TV were America's Funniest Home Videos, where people were embarrassing the heck out of themselves. Right?
Yeah, and then they made a lot of money. So just remember that. I mean, you know what? The thing is that even if you make a mistake on a live video, and fortunately, most of what we have going on right now is things that we can tape and we can edit and we can re-record if we need to. But the truth is, if you make a mistake on a live video, and I know this because I've, after 6 hours of live TV for 20 years each day, you make mistakes and you say stupid stuff. If you handle it well, it actually endears you to your audience. Don't stumble all over yourself apologizing. Don't draw more attention to it than is necessary. Depending on what the topic is and who your audience is, dealing with it with a little self-deprecating humor is usually, not always, but usually appropriate. And if you can handle it well, your audience will find that you are human. They are drawn to that humanity, and they will like you for it. That's what people are drawn to. They're drawn to your humanity. They're not drawn to your perfection. That never sold anybody anything, except maybe a model. But
that's a good thing, because
I'm like, thank goodness for that. I don't care what kind of filter Zoom has on it. It's not going to cover up everything.
No.
Yeah.
So people come to you to learn how to present. So it's not just video, though. I mean, people come to you to learn how to present in front of groups, and CEOs come to you to learn how to be more comfortable in front of groups and smooth and polished. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's a number of different things that I offer. One is video brand story development. Another is sizzle reel production. So if people have video content or they want to shoot video content and put together a sizzle reel, which they will then use to pitch themselves, let's say as a contributor to a CNN or Fox Business or an MSNBC. So, and within that scope of work, I have media training that applies for people who are looking to become contributors. So handling the live studio situation, learning to pitch yourself to media, how to handle hostile questions, how to answer in sound bites, how to make sure that your message comes across so that you do set yourself up to be a person who has credibility, visibility, and you will be invited back to contribute again when CNN has something that would lend itself to your area of expertise, or MSNBC has a story that needs a little bit of analysis by, let's say, a tech guru, and that happens to be where you are. It also means, as you mentioned, public speaking. So I don't do that as much right now because everything is virtual, and keynote speaking and large group seminars for the most part have dried up or have been put on hold. But I am also hired to not only train keynote speakers, but to be a keynote speaker myself, whether it involves motivational keynotes, whether it is a keynote that involves professional development or executive training or leadership training. And in those bodies, or within those parameters, it has to do with public speaking, right? Presentation, messaging, delivery. And while part of what I do is performance-based, how do you make sure that you are using best practices? A lot of what my belief about public speaking is that it comes down to being able to be authentic. And I know that sounds a little nebulous, but the truth is, if you're a great speaker, it's not going to matter whether you have your hand in your pocket or whether you don't look at the room in a perfect 4 quadrants. Those things are good to know. And if you're uncomfortable being on stage or talking in front of a group, knowing what those practices are important, because they do help build your confidence. And that's really what it's all about. It's building that confidence. But once you get past those basics, it's the ability to just talk and be yourself and not sound scripted, not sound rehearsed. But not sounding rehearsed takes some rehearsal. And so it's maybe not intuitive, but those things are important. They are. Yeah.
So anybody looking to just really develop their business personal brand and presence can work with you to do that.
Absolutely, right? Whether it's you need to, you want to sell from the stage, you want to be paid for speaking gigs, you are looking to up your personal brand within your corporation, and so you want to increase your opportunity for speaking, your expertise at speaking, anything that really where you need to make sure that your delivery and your message resonate in front of your target audience, whether that's with potential clients, whether that's within your corporation, whether that's on a live stage, or whether it's through a camera lens.
Great. So how do people find you?
You can find me any number of ways. You can always email me. It's Kerry at KerryBarrettConsulting.com. You can find me on my website, again, KerryBarrettConsulting.com. LinkedIn, on all the social media platforms, but for business, LinkedIn is the most prevalent. And then you can always call me, 973-210-4952.
Perfect. Thanks.
Thank you.